be on that journey and evolve your role with AI as opposed to feeling afraid that it's going to do something to you. Be in control of that and help us figure out how your role can evolve, leveraging things like AI, but also where AI may not work because it's not the silver bullet and it's not going to work for everything in every situation.
They keep telling us that it's all over for HR. The age of AI is upon us, and that means HR should be prepared to be decimated. We reject that message. The future of HR won't be handed to us. Instead, it'll be defined by those ready to experiment, adopt, and adapt. Future-Proof HR invites these builders to share what they're trying, how it's going, what they've learned, and what's next. We are committed to arming HR with the AI insights to not just survive, but to thrive. Hello and welcome to Future Proof HR, where we explore how forward-thinking people leaders are preparing for disruption and redefining what it means to lead people in a changing world. I'm your host, Thomas Kunjappu, CEO of Cleary. Today's guest is Terilyn Monroe, the Chief People Officer at Guardant Health. Terilyn is a business-first people leader and coach. She's known for connecting strategy, leadership, and culture, balancing data-driven decisions with a deeply human, heart-led approach. At Guardant, she's been helping transform both the enterprise and the business of HR itself, introducing AI-powered tools, rethinking leadership, and shaping how work gets done, all while keeping employees, patients, and customers at the center. Terilyn, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much. Great to be here.
So let's just start off with the remit of HR, right? You mentioned you think of it as you to run HR and change HR and also transform the business all at the same time. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, we call ourselves a people team because we're in the business of people. And we really feel like when you look at the end-to-end employee experience and what our remit is, it is operating like a business, meaning we have recruiters that are our salespeople and we're selling the company, the brand of the company, the roles, the experience that we want people to have when they are here at Guardant. We have products and offerings that we have for our employees. So think leadership and development offerings. If you think about all the programs that HR delivers, we provide support to employees, answering their questions like a support organization, customer service organization, if you will.
Yep.
And we think about our employees being our customers. And so when you think end to end about the employee experience and the role that we play in service to that experience, we're really operating like a mini business within HR. I didn't even mention our people business partners that are there to support the leaders that are also really understanding the strategy, not only of the company, but of the organizations that they support and translating those business strategies into talent strategies, workforce plans, and really helping ensure that the organizations at all levels can scale.
So a lot of HR leaders are often working with executive teams that haven't necessarily seen in practice more of this definition of what HR is or can be, right? So if you're, and I'm sure you've come across different, where sometimes the HR or the people team has to define themselves, right, to the leadership. So if you had to explain what is the essence of what a modern people function really can and should be for an organization, versus maybe what it was in the past, how would you describe it?
We're here to partner with the business to help accelerate our business goals, right? The vision of the company and create the best possible employee experience along the way. So it's really that twofold. It's about the business outcomes and it's about the employee experience. And then how we do it is through our product, services, and offerings that we deliver and that we maintain.
So do you think that has changed over time? That like for at least, even if in your mind it has stayed the same, the expectation and also how it's received and the day-to-day collaboration with the rest of the organization, has that shifted in your time?
Yeah, I think what we have always focused on as a function has been pretty consistent. You could say 10 years ago, weren't you focused in on helping the business achieve its goals and creating a great employee experience, whether it's hiring, engagement, retention, development, et cetera. I think what's evolved over the last several years and what will continue to evolve as we look forward into the future is how we deliver on those offerings, how we partner with the business, how we drive more operational efficiency, how we think about the employee value proposition, how we get the work done. The how is evolving so that we can have greater impact.
So what's been changing there? Technology comes to mind, obviously, but what's been changing lately, right? What's relatively new and new challenges that
Yeah.
we're all overcoming in the function?
Yeah. If you think about the last few years, so much has been evolving from the outside. If you look at the external environment, we've got all this happening on a geopolitical basis. We've had a pandemic that evolved how we thought about the work that we do, how employees thought about where they work, how they work, when they work, and what's important. And so I just think that how we're operating today is very different, which means we have to really continue to evolve and transform the processes, the workflows, and we need to do it in ways that are really human led. So we're really re engineering things and we're leveraging tools like AI to help drive more of that efficiency. But I think it's really different in the way that we're managing things today, where we need to think strategically about our end to end processes and we need to not lead with technology, but instead say, how can technology help us get better? How can technology help us create a better experience? How can technology help make things easier for us within our own organization, but then also for employees and leaders and others that we serve?
So you brought up the concept of the employee experience a couple of times, and I've paired
Mhm.
it with, hey, technology can follow these other things versus be like the lead, right? So uh, I'd love to unpack that with you a little bit.
Yep.
When you're thinking about solving for the employee experience or starting there to then go downstream to everything else, what does that mean for you? Like, how does that change the way your HR function operates on a day-to-day basis?
It's interesting. I was just in a meeting earlier today, and we built at Guardant an AI champion community. So, folks coming together who are driving could be enterprise AI use cases or initiatives or working within their teams to figure out how to better leverage AI and just sharing learnings across the group. One of the things that we were talking about, and it's something that we're always focused on within our people function here at Guardant, is design thinking. So, how do we understand what are the business requirements? What are the needs or unmet needs of our users, of our candidates, of our employees? So that when we take a step back and we say, okay, we want to design something, whether it's a new process or whether it's rolling out some new initiative, we're actually very clear on what we're always trying to solve for. And most importantly, who we're solving for. There's so many great ideas. I'm an idea person. So I can think about a million different things to do and I get excited about it. But if it's not in service to solving a real problem that our employees or leaders are having, or something that's not working in a process that's creating pain points for folks that are using our process, stakeholders that are part of that process, then it's not going to have as much impact. It's about design thinking and really incorporating design thinking into how we think about the work that we do and the improvements that we want to make, because then we'll actually be able to have greater impact.
So let me come at you from the skeptical HR or people operations associate or specialist or maybe an HR
Yep.
VP who's, hey, that's all to, or CPO to make sure that we're thinking this way. But in my day to day, what I have to deal with is all these inbound employee questions that I have to work on, or I'm just too busy with the calendar for 3 months of the year, figuring out our compensation process or our performance review process.
Mm.
Or so to come out of that to do design thinking feels like such a luxury. How am I gonna ever find the time
Yeah.
to rethink all these things fundamentally?
hmm I always go back to how can we infuse design thinking into our day-to-day work and our processes. So, design thinking is a lot easier when you're starting up something brand new. You're starting from scratch.
Right.
Absolutely. But to your point, there's a lot of things already in flight.
Mhm.
So, how do we take a step back and really ask ourselves, where are the pain points? Are we getting the exact same question from a group of employees over and over again? And does something need to improve in our process? And if something does need to improve, how do we start with the pain points of our employees? And so that design thinking just means that we are actually pausing to ask ourselves what's working really well with the end user, what's not, and how can we improve and design it in a way that improves that experience of people. So if we do it right, if we really think differently about it, it's not a separate process or separate thing. It's actually fully integrated into how we operate each and every day, whether that's around continuous improvement or addressing a reoccurring pain point or creating something brand new.
I love that pushback to the pushback. So, so and I'm a huge fan of this kind of approach, right? Employees are the customers ultimately, right? And then you're just really just focusing all your efforts on enabling outcomes for them. So as we talk about, where HR is headed, I think it's interesting for us to go a little bit, just not so far back, but clearly now in 2025, that was a different era. So let's talk about that COVID era, because there's a lot of things I know that you've went through, which can almost serve as a preview for what we're talking about generally on this podcast, which is about how we can future-proof organizations in the age of AI, right? So there are clearly some lessons there. Could you tell me a little bit about what you went through in the COVID days in your role, and what are some lessons from that?
Yeah. It is really interesting. We talk about scenario planning and the future. And one of the scenarios that I know our company, and at the time I was with a different company, I was with Varian. What we made were radiation therapy machines. And what was interesting as COVID was happening, we were trying to figure out how do we keep the business running, knowing that we were manufacturing radiation therapy machines because cancer doesn't stop even for a pandemic. And we knew that around the globe, a lot of our customers were expecting us to continue to deliver these machines and provide services and support because cancer patients still needed to go in and get treatments.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you try and balance the needs of your customers externally with this pandemic of then saying, okay, how do we keep our employees safe? How do we ensure we care for our employees and really have to make difficult decisions like, do we shut down manufacturing for a period of time? And at the time, I oversaw HR, but also our facilities around the globe. And that's a real interesting decision and really trying to weigh the pros and cons and really leaning into safety for your employees and making tough decisions to say, let's just pause, lean into safety and wellness and care for our employees,
Mm-hmm.
and then figure out how we can safely bring them back because we were all learning together, right? Do you remember all the masks and the distancing, the social distancing? And, and it was before vaccinations were coming out. And we were anxiously awaiting those. And then do you require vaccinations? Do you not? There are all these decisions that needed to get made during that time.
Right.
And I would just say it always goes back to thinking about what's most important. And that's why we were always leaning into our employees. What's most important is making sure we were keeping our employees safe at a time when they were very worried as well about their health and safety.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started there because we knew that if we had healthy, safe employees, they would solve for customers. And there are so many examples around the globe, not just at our company at the time, but many other organizations where employees just selflessly continued to provide that incredible support for patients or their customers around the globe. But I think if, as a company, we take care of our employees, they will help take care of our customers.
And so, if anything, if I'm a takeaway for me there is, if anything, that is there a lesson there that was actually being more employee centric actually is helpful in getting to business outcomes. Starting
Yeah.
there actually helps, because it's a little bit counterintuitive to me, because in a pandemic where you're looking at loss of revenue, complete business continuity issues, that's it's a space for the CFO and investors to have the biggest voice in the room about what needs to happen. But even in these moments of crisis, leading with thinking about your employees can get you down to the right answers.
That's why I always love it when, as a company, if you looked at a balanced scorecard, right? What are we doing in terms of our goals and measures that are in service to employees, to customers, to shareholders. And then in our case, because of the work that we do, the industry that we're in, we also look at patients.
Mhm.
And so when you have a balanced scorecard, you're actually trying to look at it from all those perspectives. So when you're making decisions during a crisis or in those times where decisions are really tough, you're able to look at it very carefully. And when you bring employees along that journey, as so many of us did during that time of saying, here's the situation, employees will solve for customers. If your customers know employees are cared for and caring for them, customers will solve for shareholders, right? Because they'll
Yeah.
continue to be loyal to you because they know they're getting great care from the employees. So I just feel like it's all connected together.
So let's connect that going forward then. COVID hit like a ton of bricks, and it was like a pretty, after the first few weeks, it was like a big shock to the system, right? That lasted months and quarters, if not years. What's happening right now with AI and technology shifts, it's lighter, right? It's a lighter touch, let's call it. But it's happening and it seems to be accelerating and it's making an impact on the workplace and just society from all different angles, like going forward, right? So at least with the CPO hat on, what what is the role, do you think, for you, Terilyn, and your peers within this revolution, and also what lessons, if any, can we take away from this very recent impactful event that interrupted business as usual?
It is really interesting to be in this role over the last, I would say, decade, because we just talked about the pandemic. That was a lot of learnings for all of us, and we were learning from each other, and I've gotta say, I tapped into my peers all the time who were doing amazing things, and we would share what was working, what wasn't. I think this era that we're in, another inflection point and another opportunity to continue to evolve and transform as organizations, and another time to share learnings openly because there's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of experimentation going on. And we also have to always realize and recognize what works in one company may not work in another company. What works in one industry may not work in another industry. For AI, one of the things, and I've had the opportunity to partner with our CIO, and so we're exec sponsors of really driving AI across the enterprise, building that capability, making sure that we are providing our employees with the tools and resources they need
Mm.
to successfully embrace this era that we're in and be along that journey with us, not only from a productivity perspective, but also an innovation perspective. And while we've been using AI for many years on the innovation front with our offerings, there's something to be said about this era that we're in right now where we're asking all employees to learn new things and embrace AI. And one of the things that I think every company has realized is every employee's in a different space on that continuum. Some kind of skeptical,
Right.
not quite sure, or even uncomfortable using it. Some who are like those trailblazers who are like, yeah, I'm going to check it out. I'm going to check out every tool I can. I'm going to use it however I can.
Right.
And as we think about our roles, there are things we have to help our employees with no matter where they are on that continuum. For the folks who are unsure, how do we shift their mindset and build the capability so that they get that baseline and understand how to leverage it so they themselves can continue to evolve and get better and better with that technology, but also use it because there's a lot of fear around, is AI going to take my job away? Be on that journey and evolve your role with AI as opposed to feeling afraid that it's going to do something to you. Be in control of that and help us figure out how your role can evolve, leveraging things like AI, but also where AI may not work because it's not the silver bullet and it's not going to work for everything in every situation. On the other end of the continuum, you've got those trailblazers, and we've got to make sure that we keep our data safe and that we're
Ah,
using tools
yeah.
in the right way
Yeah.
with our data being used in the right way. So it's really an interesting time as we think about how we scale and how we meet the needs of these different personas in our employee workforce.
This has been a fantastic conversation so far. If you haven't already done so, make sure to join our community. We're building a network of the most forward thinking HR and people operations professionals who are defining the future. I will personally be sharing news and ideas around how we can all thrive in the age of AI. You can find it at gocleary.com/Cleary-community. Now back to the show. I love that like framing because every organization, regardless of industry, will have this range and this starting point, which is not going to be the same across their employee population. I know earlier when we were talking about you focus specifically on senior leadership and creating like a boot camp to
Yeah.
enable them partially to get everyone at least to some similar shared like baseline, right?
Yeah.
I imagine that's part of this partnership that you talked about with the CIO's office in terms of what you're doing and enablement for the organization. Tell me a little bit about how you went from strategy about, hey, okay, we want to enable AI learning across the board to something as specific as, okay, let's do this boot camp for senior leaders in this specific way. How do you go
That's,
from that higher level decision to this particular program?
yeah. It's so important to always start with support from the whole management team. So I'm very fortunate in that I work for an organization. One of our values is blaze a trail. And we are a founder-led organization. And I love it because our founders are still very much around innovation. And so with things like AI, again, while we were using it in so many areas of product, when it came to enterprise AI, we realized even our senior management team, so think VPs and above, not everyone was using it in that way. And we thought, okay, if we're expecting the whole enterprise to leverage AI, we probably need to do some education to make sure we ourselves at the senior management team level, all of our VPs in the company have a baseline knowledge, understand the tools, understand what we want people to do with these tools and how to safely use these tools so that they can encourage their teams to use it, so that we can think about goals that are integrating AI or use cases that are integrating AI, making it safe and encouraging people to experiment and share those learnings so that together we can all continue to move forward. And it's always that tone at the top, right? So if we're using it, if we're comfortable with it, we're going to encourage our teams to use it. And we're going to be able to drive that change a lot faster through the company.
That was the intention here to get this one baseline
Yeah.
across the board. Where are you on that journey, would you say?
So we did a few things. So we had a senior management team boot camp. Everyone did it, which was great. Then we just have so many incredible L&D offerings for our employees to bring them through wherever they are on that continuum and provide support. Everything from on-demand LinkedIn learning, we do customized sessions, we do a lot of workshops. We really did shift some of the remit of our learning and development team to actually double down on AI to support the groups. We have AI Friday, every Friday, we have AI technology reviews with our tech talent, which is great, where they do a deeper dive and share learnings and use cases. But we also have an AI champion community made up of cross-functional folks from different parts of the business to talk about, hey, how do we continue to take these enterprise AI efforts to that next level? What is needed? And how do we do it again, looking at it from a people, process, and technology perspective? So it's not just leading with AI, but it's really saying, how do we think about our workflows? How do we think about our processes? And then what are the goals that this change, whatever we want to do, is in service to? Is it in service to a better customer experience, whether those customers are internal or external? Is it in service to productivity, operational efficiency, or something else? Scaling, as another example, right? Or something else.
Yeah, it seems like there's been a little bit of a backlash in the press about a lot of companies not quite seeing the ROI from AI, from these wall-to-wall uh, engagements. And I wonder if a lot of that is like too much too soon. And it's interesting to, with a smaller community like this, experiment with things, but really it goes back to asking this question: who is the customer and what is the business value? If this thing is even successful, is it worth us like pursuing? So that kind of community experimenting, but then always being forced to ask the question of, okay, why, should really help ensure there's the ROI there. So let's talk a little bit about HR specific, the people team's role within this kind of transformation.
Mhm.
Because, and I could take it back a little bit again to COVID, right? Because some of these decisions these heavy decisions, arguably even in that era, right, in many organizations, it could or could not happen. It needs to be made. It could or could not happen with the people team being right at the center of it, at the periphery, or not involved at all in
Mhm.
from these key decisions about how the business is going to operate. Um, I feel like there's a parallel here in terms of how AI will come out into the organization, right? So you mentioned you're partnering with the CIO's office. I'm just curious, like with your peers and like how you've seen just AI transformations at different kind of stages. What have you seen in terms of different models around the roles that the people function can play within this?
Mhm.
And is your chosen path and why?
Yeah. It depends on the company. It depends on the company's approach to technology like AI. It depends on the goals of the company, and it depends on the resources that you have available also within the people team to be able to partner at different levels. It really depends. So what we choose to do is our team is very focused in on a couple things. One is building enterprise-wide capability in partnership with the CIO team. And part of that is because it's not just throwing tools out there for people and saying, go experiment, but how are we building capability around it? So we are really focused in on things being people led, human led, and then AI powered. It's not the other way around. And so what that means is we need to build capability as to how to translate our strategies and our processes and helping others figure out how do you translate those things into processes and workflows and really understanding
Mhm.
when you want to improve something, you don't just start with a tool saying, I'm going to use Chat GPT or I'm going to use some new AI tool and you're going to put into an existing process. And you have to really re engineer sometimes a process because if the process is broken to begin with, it doesn't make a difference how great the technology is. It's still going to be a broken process.
Yeah.
So you have to really rethink things, which means we have to build different muscles. We have to think a little differently as an organization. And that's where our people team comes into play and how we can really help the organization have that growth mindset and take a step back to say, okay, how do we think about things with a user-centered design approach? How do we think about the pain points and re-engineering a process so that we make things better for all? And I really feel that's the role that we're playing right now and trying to play in partnership with the business and helping everyone figure out how do we do this at scale? We're never going to have enough folks where we're going to be able to have someone from the people team joining every single meeting.
Sure.
So, how do we build that capability with leaders so that they can build capabilities with their teams? How do we create champions within the organization so that they can also be those leader teachers within their teams and we can get to that scale with the mindset and the skills, the capabilities, and then we provide those scalable resources so we can all move forward faster.
Wow. So if I were to make a statement then that if there is an organization with an AI forward strategy, uh, if you're an HR leader within such an organization, if not 100%, a significant portion of your L&D efforts should be about just enabling the entire organization. Maybe it's specifically focused on senior leaders, but in some ways, in such a transformation, the L&D team is like the AI enablement team, at least for some time.
The L&D team for sure, and also how do we use AI in our own L&D offerings? So we're role modeling what that looks like, how you infuse AI into your programs. We're using it also a ton on the talent acquisition side, which is really cool, especially as we think about sourcing great candidates, right? There are amazing AI tools that are able to help us do things much more efficiently so we can cast a wider net,
Right.
find candidates we would never find before, and with much more precision. So there's a lot of excitement. So I think part of it, you're absolutely right, is how do we build capability and think about enablement for the enterprise, but how are we ourselves using the technology
Absolutely.
within our own processes and the experiences that we create so that we can actually speak to it, learn from it, and really role model.
Yeah, role modeling and walk the walk is it's really important, and specifically in this in L&D, but also in there's so many potential use cases right within the people team. You mentioned some things on the talent acquisition side. Have there been any particular stories of transformation or experimentation that you're I don't know, particularly interested in, or just see for the space within the HR function, you can
Mhm.
imagine starting to change over the next, let's say, quarters or years?
Yeah, I think so many organizations, we're in experimentation mode across every facet of the people team.
Mhm.
So whether it's our total rewards team, our L&D team, our gosh, I mentioned talent acquisition, but even I use it too when I am writing an email, let's say to all employees, and I'm like, I want to say this better. It's simple things like that. Let
Or,
me let me rely on Chat GPT to be my thought partner for a second
yeah.
and be a little bit more creative with this sentence or
Yeah.
say this a little in a little different way. So again, I think this is just a muscle we're all building and we're building it together and we have so much more to learn. I'm just excited that we're experimenting each and every day, both in big ways but also little ways like the example that I just shared.
Yeah. So let's talk about where all this experimentation might lead to, right? All the crux of what we like to get at is like, how do we just build resilient, future-proof organizations and
Mhm.
also HR functions as well, right? To enable such a thing. So what do you think that future-proof HR team looks like, and that HR function that is strategic and providing the value in the way that you were describing at the beginning of this
Mhm.
conversation, uh,
Mhm.
and is ready to take on the challenges of the future? Like, what does that look like? What are you doing day to day? Are there different titles that emerge, or how is that evolving if you're looking ahead?
Yeah. Ooh, I don't know about the titles, that's a slippery slope. So I don't know if I'm gonna try and predict what future titles might be out there. What I would say though is, and I would say this is true for any leader today, and I would also say the future is now, we need to be thinking like enterprise leaders. And what I mean by that is we need to understand the context in which we're operating. We need to understand the business. What's important in the business? How is the business doing? What are the strategies of the business? And how can we better help the business achieve its goals? I think it just all starts there as a people function. So when we talk about future proofing HR, we've got to start with the business
Mm.
because we need to translate the business strategy into a talent strategy, into a workforce of the future strategy. So that then becomes our North Star to say, okay, do we have the mindset, the skills, the capabilities needed
Mhm.
to help the organization do what it needs to do, not only today, but in the future? So to future proof HR, we've got to start with the business and understanding the business. We also need to be thinking like in just in a very systemic way or like an ecosystem. And I often say within HR and the people team, we are an ecosystem, meaning we have a lot of dependencies. So whatever I do, I need to understand how my decision is going to impact another part of HR.
Sure.
But then also let's pull back as from an enterprise leadership perspective, whatever I choose to do and the decisions I'm making, could that have any impact in terms of what IT is doing
Mm.
or what finance is doing or what's going on in the business at any time? So that ecosystem sensitivity is another thing. I think also when we are looking at the HR function, we have to be really good at prioritizing things and sequencing and staging things. So with AI that we've been spending a lot of time on today,
Mhm.
there's a lot that we could do. And so how do we sequence and stage what we choose to do that is in service to building the right capabilities at the right time with where our workforce is and where the business is? There's got to be a readiness for things. And so we ourselves have to make sure that we're constantly assessing the environment to
Mhm.
make sure that there's a readiness. And when we do roll things out, because there's a lot of cool things we could be doing, how are we monitoring the adoption of it? How it's working? How are we measuring all those things so that we're just always bringing everyone on that journey with us and we're all getting better together? So, those are just a couple of examples of how I think we can all continue to future proof HR. But again, I would always go back to it's got to be in the context of what is our business need
Business.
right now and how do we bring them along that journey of what's needed. So, we've got the right talent in the right place at the right time with the right capabilities that are all in service to the business strategy and our vision.
So if you were gonna give some advice to someone who is crazy enough to want to go into the function, coming out of college or it's like very young or early in their career, and they're interested in coming in looking to build a whole career over hopefully decades in the HR function, given that sort of like vision, what advice would you have for someone like that?
Yeah. I would say be curious and really be interested in the industry that your business is in. Really be curious and understand how it operates and think bigger, meaning don't just think about what's happening within the people function or HR, but be curious to learn about the business, the strategy, the competitors, the industry, and then really zooming out to say, what are those macro trends that are happening and best practices happening across other HR functions, other companies, and learn all the time. So it's just that growth mindset, that continuous learning, that curiosity, which I think makes us more strategic thought partners to the business.
Great advice, but particularly in this moment, right? As we close out here, Terilyn, can I just ask, are there any particular projects or initiatives that you have in the hopper right now that you're particularly passionate about or curious about where it leads to that you'd be willing to share with us?
I think workforce planning is a big one right now. As we think about how to scale our organization, as we think about this infusion of this really cool AI driven technology and how that works with our processes, what does that mean in terms of the evolution of our roles? And how can we just continue to develop our internal talent so that they're fully embracing this era that we're in and really just helping us get better and better? And as we think about workforce planning, it's not just always about acquiring new talent. How do we continue to develop our talent so that people really feel like they can grow their careers right where they are and help the company get better as they continue to get better themselves?
That's a great thought, Tarlin, because especially in a moment where a new skill set is just emerging, right? A new technology is emerging, and everyone, the entire labor market has the potential to learn that and is on similar footing. There's just as much opportunity for, and it's easier if your
Yeah,
own existing talent has the space and enablement to evolve themselves in that direction, both from an organization standpoint, but also for people themselves, for those that are able to do that.
I think it's a matter of be part of the change and help drive it. And
Yeah.
that's where that growth mindset comes into play.
So to everyone out there who's listening, probably already has a growth mindset. If you're listening on this, trying to think about how you can future-proof your own organizations and your own HR functions. I want to say thank you, Terilyn, for this amazing conversation. We reached a little bit farther back, but through COVID and like some of these lessons, as you reflected on it, right? It's just been this massive transformation and a really interesting perch to just view how society and organizations have been shifting, not to mention the HR function itself, and how these lessons can take us into this slow brewing revolution. All leaders, to your point, right? All enterprise leaders are struggling with and thinking through from different angles. There's a bunch of different takeaways here. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and some of these great projects that you've been working on with you and your team. Love to check in and see where those things are looking at in, for example, workforce planning in a year or two.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. And for everyone out there, good luck as you future-proof HR. Bye now. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Future Proof HR. If you like the discussion, make sure you leave us a 5-star review on the platform you're listening to or watching us on. Or share this with a friend or colleague who may find value in the message. See you next time as we keep our pulse on how we can all thrive in the age of AI. Hey, it's Thomas again. One quick question before you go. Are you and your HR team tired of answering the same employee questions again and again in Slack? If yes, our Cleary AI-powered Slack bot is here to help. It takes routine employee requests and answers it automatically while freeing up time for you to take on more important tasks. At the same time, it automatically builds up an HR knowledge base as you go. It's quick to set up, works right in Slack, and you can try it for free. Just head on over to gocleary.com/HR-chatbot to install it. It's again, gocleary.com/HR-chatbot. Thanks again.